What's up, everyone? Welcome to Week 2 Fantasy Football Preview of the Football Goons podcast. We're having a good time because our pre-show here has carried over into the beginning of the broadcast tonight. Had some just ridiculous jokes going for the pre-show. Just to let you know how serious we are about things and how much we take it seriously. We spent, last 10 minutes or so just goofing around, but we're glad that you're here with us tonight. We're going to ask you, take a deep breath, just like we might need to refocus, regardless of how regardless of how your week 1 turned out. There's a lot of football left to be played. So we're going to resist the urge here to overreact, except for Rocco, because he's already overreacting with no words. We had a fun week 1. That's the bottom line. Whether you won or lost, now we're going to turn our attention to week 2, get locked in, get dialed in here for this week on week 2. So pre-show, Rock, I just got to give you like a quick minute here to tell us what's going through your head right now after watching Sam Darnold last night. You might finally have a franchise quarterback. Just invite us, as scary as this sounds, into your head right now.
What a great way to start this show. All right, so I'll give all of our fans an honest review. After the first play of the game, I literally sent a message in our group text that said, "Good night. I'll see you guys later. I'll talk to you tomorrow." Because I was salty, real salty. But very quickly, my saltiness turned to elation. Listen, it's not just that we might have our guy. It's that the team as a whole looks better than I think anyone expected them to be. And I in no way think that this is going to be a 48-point per team game. But it seems that the whole culture of the New York Jets has changed, and it really revolves around Sam. The defense wants to play for their quarterback because they know their quarterback is going to do the right things by them. He just seems like a very likable guy, and he seems like he just seems like the guy you want in your corner all the time. I'm not saying he's the most athletic quarterback. I'm not saying he's got the strongest arm, because he doesn't. He's not the most athletic. He doesn't have the strongest arm. You need more than those things to win in the NFL. Otherwise, Joe Flacco would be elite still to this day if a strong arm is all you needed.
He's not.
No, he's not. So yeah, just elation from my point, because if nothing else, we're not the same old Jets. That's all I want. Right. I said that from the beginning. I did not want to be the same old Jets, still searching for an identity, still searching for a future. And I feel like we found our future. It may not be, listen, I don't even think he's as good as Carson. I don't think he's as good as Andrew. And I'm using your guys' quarterbacks as an example. I don't need him to be. I need him to be as good as Sam can be. And if that's the case, I think the Jets are set for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. Well, we were pumped watching that game with you last night. And I know this is really at risk of being super early on here, but I want to be the first to officially welcome you to the Elite Franchise Quarterback Club.
It may be early, but I'm going to accept the invitation.
All right. Well, listen, let's talk about who's trending. And when I mention that, I'm talking about some players who are being the most widely claimed players right now off of waivers. This is across a variety of different platforms, but these are the names that in general have had the most waiver claims made. I know a lot of them will run overnight tonight. Some leagues don't have, a specific deadline, so they've already been claimed. When we bring these names up, we're not talking about these guys that you should run out and drop a player that you recently just drafted 2 or 3 weeks ago just to pick up a name here. We're looking at guys who may be able to fill in for you during an injury, during a tough matchup for a player that you have who's on the fringe maybe. Ultimately, you probably don't need these guys yet, but we're going to look at the short term and the long term of it with some of these players. So let's evaluate if and where they could help you. First name on the docket here, fresh off of last night, is Quincy Enunwa, wide receiver of the Jets. He had 10 targets last night in a blowout when they just, quite frankly, stopped really throwing the ball at points in the game. Do we overlook Quincy Enunwa coming off of his injury, and maybe he's kind of the guy to own there?
I'm kind of kicking myself here. Like, I'll be upfront with our listeners and with you guys. I was really scared of the Jets wide receiving core because I felt like I didn't know who I wanted to own. So I don't think I own any shares of Jets wide receivers, because I didn't know which one I wanted. And I'm kind of kicking myself now because 2 years ago, what I saw from Quincy Enunwa is you guys will understand how much praise I give this. It's not a superstar, but like I see a lot of Wayne Corbett in Quincy Enunwa. He's reliable. He's a target you want to hit on third downs, and he's just going to go out there and grind for you. No, he's not going to give you 200-yard performances, but he's going to give you consistently like 6 catches, 70 yards. He'd give you a score every once in a while. I think he's the Jet to own. I think he's going to be the most targeted Jet, and I think he has a good relationship with Sam because he kind of fits in that H-back role. The Jets don't care about the tight end at all. They really don't. Quincy Enunwa kind of fits that tight end role for a young quarterback in Sam Darnold. So I think he's actually kind of the way you want to lean in this Jets wide receiving core.
I'm actually still in on Robbie Anderson, and I'll tell you why. Because I feel like every week we're kind of surprised by it, but like Robbie Anderson will have 1 or 2 catches, but one of them is almost always a touchdown, it feels like. So I feel like because he's the guy who's most likely to continue scoring as a wide receiver option on that team, right now that's where I'm kind of leaning. Plus, 2016, Enunwa had 105 targets. Obviously a much different situation as far as quarterbacks go, but he only converted 58 of those targets. So not particularly great for conversion rate there. Again, the quarterback is hopefully markedly better. But I want to see it. I want to see this play out more than just 1 week. I feel like Robbie still is your touchdown threat, your bigger play threat.
I mean, the problem right there, though, South, is just look at the completion percentage of the quarterbacks that were throwing the ball in each of those years. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's completing just above 50% of his passes. To last night, outside of pass number 1, Sam went 14 of 19.
Yeah, and I get that, but I think obviously it's fair to say that there's still going to be some peaks and valleys for Sam. So
yeah, I want
the big play guy.
Yeah, and you said that he's going to consistently give you 6 to 8 catches. I mean, he's had more than 6 catches 4 times in his whole career. So I can't say he's going to consistently give me that because he did 1 week this week. So I still think I'm still going Robbie Anderson. It's 1 week. I'm still sticking with my guns here with the guy that I thought would be their true number 1. He has a little more size, a good bit more speed. I think he's a better athlete, and I just think he's a better receiver. So I think that it will go back to him. Last night was an anomaly all around, I think. I hope they put up 50 plus for you every week. I just don't think it's going to happen. So I think it was just all around an anomaly game. Quincy happened to be a beneficiary there, but I think that it will swing back to Robbie Anderson.
Yeah, I'm going to continue the water on the fire thing here. I still don't want any of these guys at all. I mean, because I do believe Quincy's going to be more the target guy. I do believe Robbie Anderson's going to score more. Ultimately, we still don't know what this is going to look like when Jermaine Kearse plays. It's a great situation for real football for the Jets. I think it's a nice situation for Darnold as kind of a backup fantasy player and the running backs for keeping things honest. I don't want any of these receivers because they're all going to play.
Right.
I mean, even prior as
that's what I'm saying.
Night as a number 3, but when Kearse comes back, probably a number 4. I mean, one of those
everybody's going to get looks.
Yeah.
But ultimately, my theme of this first series, I'm not making waiver claims this week. Period. There's nobody worth my time.
All right, let's talk then on that note about TJ Yeldon.
There's nobody worth my time.
Look, if you're a Leonard Fournette owner and you're down on your luck this week and you need maybe a flex play, a dart throw, if a situation is really bad for you, is he worth a spot start if you had to play TJ Yeldon based on what we saw last week and what seems like a continued commitment to him, despite us believing all offseason that he was the clear number 3 there?
Yeah, I think that's why I think he is worth the spot start if you're a Fournette owner. I mean, for me, I don't own a lot of Fournette, so I don't have that guy I'm nervous about yet at RB2 or even flex. But they do commit to him when Fournette's out. They like him. He made plays last year when Fournette missed games. he had 4 yards per carry this year and scored through the air, or this past week and scored through the air. So if you're a Fournette owner, it's a nice way to slot in. I'm usually not a handcuff guy, but it's a perfect handcuff-like situation.
My problem is that especially this week, I don't like the matchup. Like I don't like the idea of Yeldon going up against New England without Fournette, where they can just key on him. You know what I mean? To this point, we don't know if Blake Bortles is going to be able to beat anybody with his arm. So, I mean, even New England.
We know.
I was being nice. So, like, you can kind of key on Yeldon without having Fournette in the lineup, and I think this week is just a terrible matchup. Going forward, I mean, I'd have to look up who they play next week, but I know in 3 weeks they play the Jets. So, I mean, it could be like a bad time to own Fournette if he's out because Yeldon is not going to have some favorable matchups coming up.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the Patriots. I'll just say that because, Lamar Miller went for 98 yards. Yeah. He doesn't give you what Yeldon will in the passing game. So I think that's an added element. I don't think that the Patriots are going to necessarily slow down the running back. And even if the game gets out of hand a little bit, which I'm not convinced it will, they're going to throw the ball, and TJ Yeldon is still going to be a viable target for them. So, I mean, he'll help you in that regard. So, to me, if you lost Fournette, you could do a lot worse for a flex play this week. I mean, if you've got a guy on your bench like you have a Derrick Henry, or you still have a Jay Ajayi, or another really good back because you drafted well, then obviously I'm not putting TJ Yeldon in ahead of guys like that. But if I need a back this week or a flex play and I'm desperate, I'm okay with TJ Yeldon.
Would you go Yeldon or James Conner this week?
After what I saw last week, I think I would go James Conner. I mean, they did not shy away at all from just basically plugging him into Lev Bell's role. So I'm not worried about that at all.
And he looked excellent. But that's not a if or for me. And
it definitely makes me mad that in the leagues that I own Lev that I didn't pick up Conner. And I was just like, you know what? It's 1 week. I'm going to trust my bench. Well, that would have made a huge difference. I mean, for anybody, realistically.
Yeah, and as a side note, I didn't put James Conner in here. We would think that's almost like a no-brainer, but he's like over 85% owned already. So you're most likely not getting him. If he is available in your league, he's absolutely worth a pickup. So, all right, let's talk about Jared Cook. Coming off last night's game with the Raiders, he went 9 catches, 180 in week 1. So the roller coaster here kind of continues with Jared Cook in his career. Do you expect him to be a key point of this Raiders offense, or is this a situation where you still can't trust Jared Cook because it's just a constant roller coaster with him?
No, it sure seems he's a key point. I mean, I know you look at that matchup and they're smart to avoid Talib and Peters as much as they can, but that kind of lended why he got so many looks and so many catches. But you also saw them purposely, he's split out single away from the trips, the other side of the field from the trips, and they're targeting him on plays designed basically one-man routes, fades to him over a safety into the end zone. So I think if Gruden's kind of leaning that way, and Derek Carr continues to be terrible, so he has to keep throwing the ball within 6 yards, it's going to be Cook. He's going to be the beneficiary. So, I mean, by no means do I expect anywhere near this output every week, but it does look like he's a key point. He's someone they're featuring for sure on purpose.
Well, at this point, don't you just think it's anybody other than Amari for Derek Carr?
Yeah, we're going to get there.
Okay, well, I know we're going to get there, but at the same time, like, how much of it has to do with the fact that, like, that Rams secondary is still pretty good? Like,
not a lot.
What do you mean some? Not a lot.
Are you talking about the Amari Cooper thing? Because we can fast forward that to now instead of 25 minutes from now.
No, I'm not just talking about the Amari Cooper thing, but I'm talking about the fact that, like, they kind of take away Cooper and the wide receivers.
The Jared Cook
they were
thing,
targeting linebackers instead of corners.
I think the Jared Cook thing has a lot to do with the opponent.
Like, look what happened when they did target Marcus Peters, up 50 yards to the house. Like, I mean, that's my thing. Is like, as much as you're going to bang on Amari later, I think they were avoiding Amari on purpose for the most part because they understand what that means. That means throwing at those top-rated corners.
They must have played Marcus Peters a lot of times the last 2 years. A lot
Well,
of times.
They they did play him twice last year.
Just kind of a final point on Jared Cook. I don't know until a couple days ago how many of you have ever heard of Will Dissly, but
0.
he went 3 for 105 and a touchdown against Denver, who conveniently the Raiders are going to play this week. So I think it's a similar situation where that's a good area that you could possibly exploit in the Denver defense. So I would expect another good game out of Jared Cook this week, just based on the matchup. And like you said, Miles, they're just finding ways to take advantage of his athleticism and the mismatch that he creates. So I would expect that they continue to do that. My biggest concern is that he stays healthy above everything else. So if he does that, I think that he could be a top 10 tight end this year pretty easily based on, what he brings to the table. All right, let's talk about John Brown. We've talked about John Brown a lot on this podcast, almost to the point of like borderline exhaustion. I know it's going to be annoying because we're talking about him in the context of Joe Flacco using him, but with the big arm of Joe Flacco, doesn't that kind of fit what John Brown can do? He's kind of that big play, that over-the-top guy. The Ravens need someone to catch the ball. Is John Brown going to add any value at all?
Yes.
I agree.
No, like, listen, John Brown's biggest thing is, like, I don't think he's, like, that much of a complete receiver. I think he's best when he's running fly patterns. I mean, I don't look at him the same way I look at Crabtree. Then they're not the same player. So Joe Flacco's only strength is in his arm. So I love it. I love him for the same reason you guys love Robbie. I think he's the more likely option to score, even though Crabtree's been like a target machine in the red zone for the Raiders the last couple of years. I mean, I think I saw a stat. He's got the 5th most receiving touchdowns in the league over the last 3 years. Like that's Michael Crabtree. Like that, nobody would have guessed that, but he does. So, but in this situation, given this quarterback, I like Brown better.
Yeah, and actually, the one thing I like about Brown versus Arizona Brown is the touchdown he had on Sunday wasn't some 60-yard go get it.
Yeah.
It was a 7-yard touchdown. So it shows that he's – and it wasn't like they're featuring him kind of thing. Like it was a scramble drill play, and he did the smart thing and stopped and found a hole in his zone, and Flacco found him. So it was a nice score for Brown in terms of, Robbie Anderson, shocker. It was 40-something yards, 41 yards. Like that's what he is. I'm more impressed with, I know Brown is still that, and he showed a nice ability to get open in the red zone. So that's going to kind of open up his book a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a crazy stat that I heard, and I know this is very misleading, so don't take this and run with it by any means, but no wide receiver in the league over the last 3 seasons, when they've been healthy and been playing, which is a big part of this, has averaged more fantasy points per touch than John Brown. That just goes to show you how big of a big play guy he could be potentially. I mean, we're talking Antonio Brown is behind him. Julio Jones is behind him in that category. Now, obviously, they've done it with a lot more touches, so it's a lot more impressive. But it's just a little bit of a taste on that big playability that John Brown brings to the table.
It's kind of a little bit what we've talked about with Tyreek and Ty, that anytime he gets the ball, it doesn't have to be a fly pattern. He's an athlete enough that it's dangerous.
Yep. All right, another name here to talk about, Brandon Marshall of the Seahawks now. Look, Doug Baldwin is expected to miss anywhere from 2 to 4 more weeks after having a setback recently. Marshall had a touchdown last week. He had another one that was actually called back because of a penalty. Is Brandon Marshall a viable option here with Doug Baldwin on the shelf? Are we looking at a guy who might be a red zone target for Russell Wilson?
Yeah, that's kind of one thing he's never been bad at, right? I mean, the red zone, go get it, score a touchdown is kind of what he can do. I'm still, I think, not overly interested. Ultimately, the same reason that I haven't been overly interested in many Seahawks is I just don't think the offense is that good outside of Russ being magical. But I will say that kind of, we come at this, and I come at this, I should say, in week 2, like everybody's at full strength and your team should be better than that. Maybe it's not. Maybe maybe you got just really beat up with the injury bug. You could do worse than a guy who's going to get targeted in the red zone.
Yeah.
And I definitely prefer him to Tyler Lockett personally, if you've got to go to that Seattle well. So I don't know. It could be worse than a guy who has a good likelihood to score.
Here's my question for you, because you are a Russ lover. So how many touchdowns do you think Russell Wilson will have this season? It just spitfire.
I mean, I don't see any reason he can't hit that 30, 35 number again.
Okay, so if Baldwin's going to miss extended time, I can't see not owning Marshall then, because I think he's going to be the like, you know what I mean? Like,
that's what I'm saying. It's just it's a glimpse into me as a fantasy player. The same reason I'll concede that Chris Thompson's a very good player and I won't draft him. I don't want a receiver that I say the tight end thing. I don't want a receiver I have to pray he scores, because I know he's not going for 85 yards. I know he might get a decent amount of catches, but that Brandon Marshall's gone. I got no shot at 120 yards. So if I want to really keep pace with the guy who has Michael Thomas or the guy who has Julio Jones, and I know no one's putting Brandon Marshall in that category, but if I'm going to start him in my fantasy team, I need him to have big games, and he's got to score twice to be a giant contributor, in my opinion. And it's possible, but I'm not relying on it.
Back to that Brandon Marshall versus Tyler Lockett. I would rather have Tyler Lockett by a lot. And a lot of that is what you had said, that I don't think the offense is very good. Brandon Marshall almost has to be in the red zone to score. I don't know that they're going to be in the red zone enough for that to be an option. So Tyler Lockett, he's going to get some receptions. I mean, he had a good game with 3 receptions, 59 yards, and a touchdown. I think those are pretty solid numbers for him that he's going to be around. And Brandon Marshall, he's going to have a good many weeks with 0 catches. So I can't have that on my team.
I can't agree with that at all. 0 catches.
Yep.
Whew. As a starting receiver, you got to go 0. It's not Amari Cooper out there, man.
0 catches. Write it down.
I think.
What do I get if Brandon Marshall goes the whole season without getting 0 catches?
I'll think of a prize for you.
I think ultimately it's my heart's not like, I don't want either player at all. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to stand on the table for my guy versus Lockett.
Sure.
If you want Lockett, go for it.
Yeah.
You know, Seattle was an awful fantasy situation, and it somehow, against all odds, got worse.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about one more name here. That's George Kittle, tight end of the San Francisco 49ers. Kittles and bits.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah, you know I had to throw something corny in there. 5 catches, 90 receiving yards last week. If you were watching, though, you noticed that he dropped a big one that would have definitely went for a long touchdown. 9 targets in the game from Garoppolo. Is George Kittle kind of a guy who could be a shot in the dark play as a tight end for you this year? It just feels like once you get past those top guys, everything's a dart throw. So if you're going to find a guy who might be more integrated in his offense, isn't it worth a shot with George Kittle?
I mean, if you're streaming tight ends, I mean, this is a guy you want to look at, I guess, just because like this is what he's been since Jimmy's been the quarterback there.
Yeah. Why are we talking about streaming tight ends?
I just wanted to be my starter.
I mean, I'm honestly sad that I didn't end up with him in any of my 8 leagues. He's not my tight end, but he's not a streamer. That's why I made that face. Like,
no. I understand.
He should be your tight end. Like, obviously not if you're the Gronk, Kelsey, Ertz kind of group, but there's no reason Kittle's a streamer.
Let me. Can
I said from last year? No, because I'm talking now. Garoppolo just always loved him.
What my point is it's not like I'm not saying that you're streaming him. What I'm saying is if you're a streamer and this guy is now available to you, it solved your problem. That's where I was going with that. Because this is not a guy that was drafted in the top 8 or 10 tight ends. You know what I mean? He was probably drafted in that 11, 12 range, maybe even lower. And now you probably solved your answer at that. And I think it's good that it happened in week 1. Obviously, the drop hurts, but like we saw right away that this is just a continuation of where he left off last year with Jimmy. So that's what we can expect from him going forward.
So what I hear you saying is that if Miles wouldn't have started talking while you were talking, Miles wouldn't have had to talk at all.
Exactly. I would have gotten there eventually. No, I understand why he jumped in the way he did because I did say streaming, but that's not what I meant with Kittle.
you meant you could stop.
All right, so that's our quick look at some of the names that are being picked up at a higher rate off the waiver wire this year. A little bit of a short-term glance for them, and maybe some long-term prospects for them as well, just from our opinion. Let's talk about our friends at Gorb for a second here. And if you're watching live here on YouTube, and why wouldn't you be? Because every Tuesday night, 9 o'clock, fantastic show we put together for you here. You notice that behind all of us, we have our sponsors behind us as well. And it says right behind us, get hungry or be hungry. Did you know that in life, you basically have those two choices? You could either get hungry or you can be hungry. And getting hungry is about going after those things that fuel you, those things that you're passionate about, instead of being hungry and always wishing that you did. It's not about what it sounds like on the surface, but it's about having that constant reminder that in life, if you want something, you've got to get hungry and you've got to go after it. Check them out at gorb.com, GHORBH.com. They can get you all hooked up with gear for it is hoodie weather now. I know that we're happy about that. It's been pretty chilly, pretty damp the last couple of days here. It's hoodie weather. You need a good hoodie, a comfortable hoodie, one that looks good, feels good, everything. Check out gorb.com. You could get some gear that will give you a constant reminder that in life you've got two choices. You could either get hungry or be hungry. Gorb.com, GHORBH.com. All right, let's look at a couple of tough calls here. And some of these, they're kind of marked red in the matchup column just based on some reputation things here. Some of these players are kind of matchup proof, and that's why I wanted to specifically talk about this, because you see so many questions out there asking about players. Should I sit this player this week? And it feels almost like a no-brainer, but I feel like we have to address it. So first one that we're going to talk about here, Tom Brady on the road at Jacksonville this week. Do you have any reservations at all about playing Tom Brady against the Jaguars?
Zero. Tom's matchup proof. I mean, Jacksonville was playing at the best maybe we've ever seen Jacksonville play last year in the AFC Championship game, and Tom Brady goes 280 and 2 touchdowns. They're terrifying, but it's Tom Brady. You start him.
Yeah, just the amount of conversation.
He went 290. I just wanted to clear that up.
So the amount of conversation that was out there today, though, about Tom's got the Jaguars today. Should I consider, picking up Case Keenum or maybe playing a different player? Like, don't overthink it. Honestly, like you can't say this enough. Tom Brady, you drafted him for a reason. You should never have to think about not playing Tom Brady unless he's on a bye or he's injured. That's pretty much it. Brady's matchup proof.
If you're playing against the Red Swarm, please sit Tom Brady.
and let's just say this and throw this out there. If you're going to beat Tom Brady, it's not going to be in like a 10-7 game. Like, more than likely, you're going to outscore the Patriots, and it's going to be like 35-28, which means Tom still had a good game. Or
41-33.
It could have been, like 41-33 probably. That's a better estimate probably.
Sounds about right.
All right, let's talk about Joe Mixon here, because it seems like, this is another one that falls into the no-brainer category here. Coming off of a 17-carry, 95-yard game, got into the end zone last week against the Colts defense, but he draws Baltimore this week, kind of a short week situation. They are at home, but in his 2 games against the Ravens, he only averages 52 yards against them. So is this a situation where you're scared, or is this just like a whole new season, a whole new Joe Mixon?
I am not scared. This is a new Joe Mixon, and I love this Joe Mixon. This Joe Mixon makes me forget about last year's Joe Mixon. I think D'Lo said it like 1,000 times. Last year, they weren't as good as they expected to be, and it was kind of like, why are we going to rush this guy out here now? Yep. It's too much publicity that we might not need. Let's ease into this. This year, they don't have to ease into it. They're going full steam, and Joe looks great.
Yep.
And in addition, the home team on Thursday night just plays well. Or maybe the away team plays like trash. I don't know. But it's a tough matchup for sure. But they've just made no secrets, whether it be in interviews and then on the field, what we just saw, how they feel about Mixon. They wanted to get the ball.
I mean, I've been saying it for 2 years. Joe Mixon's a special player, and now it's showing. I mean, the matchup, it wasn't too tough, against the Colts this past week. Their defense is better, but still, whatever the case was, he had his way with their defense. He did whatever he wanted. You could see that the offense is running through Joe, and I don't think that it's going to stop that.
All right, a little tougher one here. Kenyon Drake of the Dolphins at the New York Jets this week.
Hard pass.
Gosh, until they start losing, we got to eliminate all Jet stuff from the podcast.
Come on, but
it's not allowed on the podcast.
Let's be serious. Listen. I've come at everything that we've talked about today extremely unbiased, even when it pertains to the Jets. Let's just look at facts. The Jets shut down the Lions running game yesterday.
Well,
yeah,
you're right. Well, very well. And on top of it, in Miami, I understand the rain starting and stopping and rain delays. Like Frank Gore looked like a better running back at 35 than Kenyon Drake did yesterday or Sunday. And part of that might have been, the starting and stopping and rain delays and all that stuff. But like, you can't tell me that Kenyon Drake's the lead back in that backfield going forward.
2-hour breaks. 2-hour breaks are great for Frank Gore at this point. Like he could take as many 2-hour breaks as possible.
Two 2-hour breaks is probably even better.
Yes.
No, but what I'm saying is like Frank Gore did more with his touches than Kenyon Drake did with his.
That's true.
And they're playing a better defense, a better front seven. And no, you know what? I'm not even going to be shy. They're playing a better defense this week than they did on Sunday. So yeah, no, I'm not trying to be biased. It's legit. It's a concern.
But the part about the Lions was ridiculous, though. Like that.
But why? Like
they haven't had a 100-yard rusher in 74 years.
Okay, but they have a brand new head coach with a new philosophy. They tried to get the running game started. They couldn't.
74 years.
They tried to get the running game started, and then they couldn't. And then they tried to throw, and they couldn't. So let's do this.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's something to be said about them slowing down the Lions, but I'm not taking too much away from that, just because until the Lions prove, despite however many new head coaches they've had over the years, that they care about trying to run the football, I'll believe it then.
If the Lions come out this week with a 100-yard rusher, do the Jets get more credit?
If Kenyon Drake doesn't have 200.
Look, I don't love the matchup. It's just not a great matchup for them. I think that you're going to see a situation where they kind of mix it up still with their backs. They're going to have to throw the ball a decent amount. I don't know how the line has changed, but they were actually favorites going into New York before the game last night. I'm sure that's changed at this point, but
I'm sure it's changed.
I feel like they're going to kind of be playing from behind a little bit. So I don't know the game script is going to help him. He had 14 rushes last week. I mean, I'm not going to worry too much. Is he the lead guy yet or whatever? I just don't think it's a great matchup.
Yeah, I agree with that. I all that I said about how bad the Lions rush is. The Jets have a good defense, so yeah, I think you probably have a better option than Kenyon Drake at this point. He's probably going to be starting in your flex, and you probably have a better receiver at this point to play there.
All right, we're going to skip down to an interesting one here because this is one that I saw in a conversation on the Twitter today. Davante Adams versus Minnesota. And on the surface, this feels kind of like a why in the world would you bench Davante Adams? But some interesting stats kind of go with this. So he's going to play against the Vikings defense this week. Are you concerned at all about playing Davante Adams?
No. I mean, concerned. Yeah, of course. It's a really tough one, and he may or may not deliver. This might be squat, but he absolutely fits the start your studs thing. The only reason I'm ever not starting Davante Adams is Minnesota, and he's got a bum ankle. You know what I mean? And he's kind of limited, but
and DeShone Kizer's his quarterback.
Okay, yeah, and Rodgers is playing. I think Rodgers is going to play. I think the reemergence of Randall Cobb and Geronimo, I can't even say that right now. Geronimo Allison looked solid as well, and that only helps Davante Adams. I know. Listen, Xavier Rhodes is a monster, and I am going to imagine they're going to follow, but I'm starting Davante Adams.
Yeah. So the premise for where this came up basically was he hasn't produced a ton against the Vikings in his career. So the most he's ever had was 5 catches against them for 54 yards, but he also did score in his last 2 games against the Vikings, despite
There's a
not
shocker.
having despite not having a lot of catches or a lot of yards. So he is still finding the end zone in his last 2. Before that, he was shut out the 4 previous before that and had like 1 catch, 3 catch, 3 for 26. So they did do a nice job of shutting him down. But I feel like, that was still at the time when, Jordy Nelson was kind of the focus. They had some different elements. We're still talking about Cheeseburger Eddie being an element of the offense at that point. So I think that you could temper your expectations because the matchup really suits Randall Cobb because the Vikings are a little weaker in the slot more than anything. But Davante Adams, again, we go back to this point a lot. He's the most likely receiver when they get down there to score a touchdown. And he's proven that the last 2 times they played the Vikings. So great. He only catches 3 balls for 30 yards, but one of them's a touchdown. Well, all worry is erased at that point. All right, last one here. Corey Davis versus the Houston Texans. Everybody had really high expectations for Corey Davis kind of coming into this season. Now there's a chance that Marcus Mariota is not even going to play this week. At this point, are you sitting Corey Davis?
Yeah, I'm not sitting Corey Davis either. I mean, he's obviously a little bit tighter than Davante Adams, and it may depend on your league. I mean, if you're in kind of the new standard, which is just 2 receivers and a flex, then I may consider sitting him based on what the rest of my team looks like. If I have 3 receivers, like used to be the standard, he's definitely my 3rd receiver. But will I start him over some of these flex running backs? Depends on your roster. Houston's tough, but Philip Dorsett definitely had some success this last week. They shut down Chris Hogan, so it kind of looks at what are they going to do? Are they going to play Hogan the way they play Davis? Then that's a little bit scary. But if he can get open, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he had 13 targets.
It's crazy.
He's going to get some looks for sure.
Yeah, I think I agree there. I think that he's still the target guy for them. So regardless of who's going to play quarterback, the targets are going to come. At this point, with the way that Mariota's been playing, is there that huge of a drop-off as far as completion percentage? No. So, I think it really doesn't matter so much the quarterback. Corey Davis is still going to be their guy when they need to make a play. And now with Delaney Walker being down, I think that just elevates it even more. So
I was going to say the fact that Delaney Walker is gone makes it even more that you can't sit him. Because now, he's not even losing targets to the tight end. He's just the guy there, top dog on every level. So who's ever playing quarterback is going to be looking his way.
All right, let's finish out with some initial reactions this week. So we'll talk through some things that we saw in week 1 and decide if it's worth being concerned about. And we're going to take a question from Facebook here. Kevin from Binghamton wants to know, after Matthew Stafford and his terrible performance this past week, is it worth going with Alex Smith over him for this week?
It's a tough one because, God, he looked so bad, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't. I made fun of you earlier, Rock. The Jets did look really good defensively.
Yeah.
Darren Lee looked like he was winning the Olympic high jump medal on both picks, and then he broke one up later in the game that would have been a really gigantic play that he got up for. Ultimately, Stafford's playing in San Francisco. I don't mind that matchup at all. Kirk Cousins looked pretty good this past week. Where are we with Alex Smith here? I'm trying to find him. He's in at home against Indianapolis. He's at home against. Oh, it's at all right.
No. I'm sorry. Home
against the Colts. I guess all I'll say is I think both games have kind of equal chance of turning into more of a shootout. What I did see out of the Redskins was they may try to keep the ball out of Andrew Luck's hands by just pounding it with Peterson. So personally, I know it's hard, but it's time to not react from an awful week 1 performance. I would stick with Stafford this week.
I would go out Alex Smith. I mean, I've always been the go with Alex Smith guy, but
I've always not. So
and last year he was number 3 in the league. This week he was what? I think number 3 in the league. So he's just consistently scoring. And is he throwing the ball 60 yards downfield? No, never. but he's scoring well. He kept it up this week. He has good weapons, and I would keep rolling with him.
Is he throwing the ball 16 yards downfield? No, never. I mean, it's just no. Listen,
He's scoring.
This is a little biased because of how much I like him, but Matthew Stafford is still a stud when it comes to fantasy. A lot of it is empty numbers because Detroit doesn't always get the win. But like Matthew Stafford has thrown for 4,000 yards in 7 straight seasons,
and he got outscored last year by Alex Smith.
And last
week. But if you gotta trust one of those guys to go out there and give you a 300-yard, 3-touchdown game, who do you think it is?
Well, I mean, you're taking a shot at that, though. Or are you going to take a shot at, I know what my ceiling is. I'm probably not going to get, you might get 300 out of Alex Smith. You're probably not going to get 350 and 4. You might get that out of Matthew Stafford once out of every 15 games. But I know that I'm probably going to get 280 to 300 and 2 to 3 touchdowns. And I love that.
I'm looking it up right now.
I've got to say, I'm not going to say I'm pulling the trigger and starting Alex Smith. But look, if you're playing based on just kind of like the safety blanket philosophy, then Alex Smith is definitely the safer play this week, especially when you consider the matchup. But I'm kind of more prone at this point. Like, I think Matthew Stafford is going to bounce back, and I think that he's obviously got the much higher ceiling out of the two. So I'm still going to take that chance. You know, you look at what Kirk Cousins did last week against the 49ers. I think that there's no reason to believe that Stafford can't do something similar to that. So for me, I'm going to play for the higher upside. All right, while we're talking about quarterbacks here, Ryan Fitzpatrick looked great against a Saints defense that was pretty good last year. Might be an overreaction, might just be kind of like a week one thing. If he stays hot, and the Bucs win a couple games here, does Jameis Winston stay on the bench when he's eligible to come back?
I certainly think it's possible. I just don't see it continuing against Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. I think that's kind of my main issue. You've got the Eagles coming to town who just did a pretty stand-up job against Matt Ryan, and we can all laugh about how average Matt Ryan is, but I mean, we're talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick as well. So, and then they got to go to Pittsburgh. And now if I'm wrong, then look out. I don't think we see Jameis this year if I'm wrong, but I feel pretty confident the Pennsylvania teams will be kind of bring that guy back down to earth a little bit.
No, I agree with you 100%. Like, I don't think that it's a stretch because there was already talk of like possibly trading Jameis in the offseason because of the headache. And if you're getting competent quarterback play, better than competent quarterback play from what we saw on Sunday.
Quarterback play.
Yeah, excellent quarterback play from Fitzpatrick. I mean, no, he's not your answer long term, but like you can address that, in the offseason, and see what's out there. And get rid of the headache that is Jameis Winston's off-field issues and attitude. But like you, I don't think it continues, at least not this week. I can see it against Pittsburgh some, just because of what we just saw against Pittsburgh, but I mean,
what did we see?
The Browns in a torrential downpour made them look extremely average. Like,
but we're talking about fantasy points to a quarterback.
Yeah, no thanks to that.
What did Tyrod do? They turned the ball over 6 times and they still only scored 3 touchdowns.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're not going to be in a torrential downpour every week. Like,
the weather actually really wasn't that bad in Cleveland. Not to throw that at you, it really wasn't that bad.
Well, all I saw in the fourth quarter was pouring rains and missed field goals. And
based on the last week, it might rain every day forever. It might just keep raining.
Yeah. Look, here's the interesting thing about this: if they could come out of the next 2 games with a win, or at least play at a high level still and be competitive, I think it's going to be hard to put Jameis back in there because somebody who I find as an interesting follow on Twitter brought this up. The Panthers' offense didn't look world-beating this past week. The Falcons are getting injured left and right, and you've already got a game up now on the Saints. So if you've got a shot to kind of make a run at a division here, especially if you're Dirk Cutter and your job is probably on the line, you've got to play the hot hand. So I wouldn't be totally shocked to see him continue to play.
Yeah.
All right, so Philip Lindsay matched the workload of Royce Freeman and scored last week for the Broncos. We've all been on record to say how much we like Royce Freeman. So is this something that, you should potentially react to and be worried about Royce Freeman, and there's going to be more of a balanced workload in Denver? Or was this just a 1 week situation that you expect to play itself out?
I don't think this is what Freeman owners want to hear. His draft price got pretty high. And if you have him, you spent on him. Yep. Especially, we always preach, and the whole industry preaches, draft as late as you can. Well, the later you drafted, the higher pick it took to get Royce Freeman. And, I was that in 2 leagues. I have him. I like Royce a lot. Ultimately, we weren't listening. Denver's been saying all spring and all summer, we're going to play the hot hand. And, yeah, some weeks Royce Freeman's going to be the hot hand. He's going to have some 120-yard, 2-touchdown weeks. But this week it was Philip Lindsay. One week, against all odds, it might be Devontae Booker.
No, it won't.
It could. It could be a thing. All right, ultimately, the good news is he's going to have his turns. I'm keeping him in my lineup, but we weren't listening. That's my – we were saying Freeman versus Booker, and then we looked and Booker's terrible. We weren't listening. They said hot hand. We're riding the hot hand. Well, we just saw it's true. Now, he still got his looks. He still got some points. But if Philip Lindsay comes out on fire and ran as hard as he did on Sunday, he's going to have his weeks too.
Well, how much of that do you attest to Philip Lindsay being the hot hand because you're just playing a really weak Seattle defense that unlike what we've seen in the past? You know what I mean? Like
it was weak against Royce Freeman too.
Yeah, was Royce Freeman playing a different team?
No, but styles lend itself to that like
I think if you look back, if you look back at the way Philip Lindsay ran the ball, actually look at it, you'd be pretty impressed. I know that we don't all have Game Pass and things like that, but this was not big play and screen pass. He ran hard and he ran well, and he's capable of that. And so is Royce Freeman. I'm not trying to be a doomsday guy here. Royce Freeman's going to have some great weeks, but there will be weeks that you're frustrated with. He doesn't get the touchdown. He doesn't get the big plays. He's not in there all the time.
So on that same vein, did we kind of do the same thing with Marlon Mack? We kind of look at him for how we feel about him at times, but the Colts went and drafted a couple different running backs this offseason, and Jordan Wilkins and Nyheim Hines come in and they look good this week. So does that spell bad news for Marlon Mack, or do you feel like this is a situation where he can kind of work himself back into a more prominent role?
It's a really similar situation to what we just talked about, but the benefit is Marlon Mack had the exact opposite situation going on with his draft price. So the later it got, the less you spent on Marlon Mack, so you can kind of swallow it a little more.
Yeah.
I think Mack's thing comes down to injury too. Like I think Mack is the better player. Doesn't mean that won't ride the hot hand every once in a while, but can Mack stay healthy enough to actually get on the field and push those other two guys? Because right now, it doesn't matter. I don't think Mack's been 100% yet.
I agree with that. Well, last year maybe they just didn't play him.
No, I mean this year.
Oh, okay. I don't think Nyheim Hines is an every down back. I just don't think he is. So I don't think he really figures into the equation of starting back because he's going to get his third down looks because he's a good receiver. We'll see what happens with Wilkins versus Mack, but I think they're still going to give Mack a shot at it. I don't think it's going to be, Wilkins is playing well. I don't think Wilkins will play into the job well enough for them not to give Mack a shot.
Yeah, I guess my concern here is with Hines, actually, because if they get to a point where they're playing a lot of games that are shootouts, where they're playing from behind, I think he's going to get a lot more looks because he brings more in the passing attack than some of these other guys do. So
Marlon Mack's a really good receiver too.
Yeah, I just feel like he's probably not as explosive as Hines could be. And it's kind of like that whole Chris Thompson thing and all those years with Danny Woodhead where like they're just really good after the catch and they just continue to pick up, chunks of yardage when you need them. And I feel like, as a play caller for all these weeks that you don't have Mack, you're now becoming more and more comfortable with Hines in that role. So
Right.
could be overthinking it. It is week 1, but let's talk about another running back here. Austin Eckler vultured yet another touchdown for the Chargers this week. Are you concerned that this is going to remain a trend? And I'm going to go first because I'm really concerned. I'm really, really concerned because I've invested highly in Melvin Gordon the last 2 years. Rightfully so. He's a really good football player, a great back. And Austin Eckler is the thorn in my side. He is the reason why every Sunday I tell you guys I'm thinking about quitting fantasy forever. Because it doesn't make any sense that Austin Eckler is finishing every drive with a garbage touchdown. Now, yeah, he did put up good numbers this week, and it was spread out. Long term, though, do you see this kind of being an issue? You think Eckler is going to get quite a few touchdowns this year?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say
Why do you hate me?
I'm not going to say I'm concerned. What I will say is he has definitely done a full 180 from who in the world is that to he's a solid weapon. Like it's kind of a Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman light situation where Eckler's a good player. They're going to get him in. Ultimately, as a Melvin Gordon owner, you're frustrated that Eckler got the touchdown. The encouraging news is Melvin Gordon had 100-yard receiving.
Oh, he had a bajillion yards, yeah.
He had an incredible game, and in spite of the fact that it didn't come true this week, he's still going to get the touchdown more often than Austin Eckler is. So it's just that classic week 1. I'm frustrated because Eckler got the score. Gordon's a monster, and it's still always going to be frustrating when Eckler gets the touchdown because just as a running back owner, it's more and more rare every year that running backs get the touchdown. So you certainly don't want it to be your guy's backup, but ultimately, I would not say concerned, but I will say Austin Eckler is a thing. Let's get used to it.
Yeah, and this is another situation where we should have been listening because all summer long, all the blurbs from the Chargers were kind of saying, hey, we want to get Austin Eckler more involved. And you always hear that from a team and you think, all right, whatever. Like everybody wants to get so-and-so more involved because they're a good guy. They know the system, whatever. This apparently was pretty true. Because they're finding ways to get him on the field at the same time as Melvin Gordon. They've got specific packages for Austin Eckler. So, there was more than a seed or a kernel of truth here with Austin Eckler.
I think the classic overreaction here, too, is that it's week 1, and if you're started 0-1, you're like, oh, man, Austin Eckler's going to kill me all season long. Well, I kind of heard like a really interesting take on real-life football, not just fantasy here, but like, if the Lions have this hiccup game in week 10 after being 8-2, you're like, oh, it's a bad game. But because it's week 1, we're like, well, this is what the Lions are this year, and you kind of have the same thing in fantasy. Well, my life is just Austin Eckler stealing touchdowns from Melvin Gordon, who I drafted at number 7 overall. Like, it's frustrating because it's week 1 and this is all we have to go by right now. But in reality, like Miles said, Melvin Gordon's going to be the guy that scores more touchdowns.
All right, so let's get to our last point here of discussion. We kind of touched on it just briefly a little bit ago. Amari Cooper, 1 catch, 9 yards. A lot of owners were already frustrated with him from his previous performances last year. We kind of thought, all right, new year, new opportunity. They've been talking him up. So is this a bad matchup for him, or is this concerning to you?
It's super, super concerning to me. This dude is just dead to me. His career is being ruined by Derek Carr. Absolutely ruined. I do own him in 1 league, and it's still crazy tempting to play him every week. I don't think I can unless it's a juicy matchup. I mean, obviously, he's not the last receiver, the first receiver that Talib and Marcus Peters are going to shut down. But you got 3 targets. Like you drafted him as a fantasy owner in the same area as Jarvis Landry, 15 targets. Golden Tate, 15 targets. Corey Davis, 13 targets. He only had 2 more targets than Nick Foles this week. All right. I was hoping that Crabtree moving to Baltimore would kind of remedy the situation. Ultimately, Derek Carr just still doesn't care that he's on the team. He doesn't care he's out there. Here's the Amari Cooper thing. We're playing him because of his draft pedigree and his name and his talent. This isn't some draft bust. He's a good player. Ultimately, we're not listening for the third time. You ready for this? 6 of Amari Cooper's last 13 games, he has fewer than 10 receiving yards. 6 of his last 13 games are 9 or fewer receiving yards.
That's
and
not
we're
good.
still playing him as a wide receiver too.
Our senses are
Stop
bad.
it.
Because
Stop.
not only are we not listening, we're not watching.
Yeah, they don't care that he's there. And I honestly, first drive, I thought it was different. They gave him a nice little end around. I was like, sweet, Guru's going to get him involved. Nope, we're done here. We're done here. I can't do it. I won't.
It's so frustrating because like I want to disagree with you.
You
But
can't.
but you're right. I the only way I can disagree with you is by looking at his draft pedigree and his actual talent. Like this dude is a top 5 talented wide receiver in the NFL, and we're just not seeing it. Like if he was on any other team, this guy would be the man. And we're like, he's like Julio Jones, but like realistically ignored. Like we get mad because Julio gets ignored in the red zone, but he still has 1,400 yards receiving every year. Like Amari's just not there, but could be, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, Miles kind of stole my thunder, so I'm not going to go too much further. But just the trends over the last couple seasons, they're not good. They're not good. I'm not buying into it's just Marcus Peters thing, because if you're going to use your guys, you're going to use your guys. You can't be scared of a corner. If you feel like you have a talented player, you have to find ways to give them the ball, and they're just not doing that with Amari Cooper, and that's an alarming trend. So I'm very concerned. All right, so the last order of business here before we finish up is we got to give you an update on our survivor for the 2018 season. I'm a little embarrassed to tell you that half of the goons are already eliminated. Rocco and Deal went down last week to the jaws of defeat. So, Rock, tell us who you had last week.
I had the Tennessee Titans versus the Miami Dolphins.
All right, and Deal, who did you have?
I don't want to.
Deal had the Saints against the Bucks. So, Miles, you are still alive. Who'd you have last week?
Yeah, I was victorious, and I'm actually like tied for first all time in the world because of point differential. I took the Ravens to beat the Bills, and they squeaked that one out.
Yes. I actually did squeak one out with the Jaguars beating the Giants. I was a lot more confident in that than it turned out.
Mm-hmm.
So Miles and I are still alive. So, Miles, I'm going to give you first crack at it. Who are you taking this week? Obviously, as per the rules of the game, now you cannot take the Ravens again, as much as I know you want to.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to play it, in my eyes, a little bit more of a safe bet this week. However, I'm going to challenge myself a little bit more than doing the pick against Buffalo every week thing that a lot of people are probably going to do. I'm going to go divisional game, and I'm actually going to take the Los Angeles Rams at home to beat the Arizona Cardinals.
Well, this is going to be interesting then, because knock, knock.
Who's there?
Owen.
0-2
Cardinals. I'm taking the Rams.
Well, this could be a dead segment here in about 5 days.
Guess
Let's go
what?
Cardinals. Let's go.
Guess what? Let's go Cardinals, because I hope we never have to do this stupid thing all year. Because you know what? What's going to be really frustrating is if these two goons go like undefeated in this, and me and Deal have been sitting here every week during this segment like.
But I'm just gonna start shutting my computer at this point.
I'm going to start throwing it in like first segment. That'd be great.
I'm not gonna be here the rest of the time.
All right, guys. Well, listen, Miles and I both going with the Rams this week against the Cardinals. Hopefully it works out. It looks like it most likely could on paper. So if not, Survivor might be over pretty early for 2018.
Let's go Cardinals.
All right, that's it for this week's edition of the show. Good luck to everyone in week 2. Be sure to keep up with us on social media, facebook.com/footballgoons. You'll get all the links to the podcast, all the links to our updated fantasy rankings, and our weekly Goons, Ghosts, and daily fantasy football value article. They'll come on Facebook as well as at Football Goons on the Twitter. You'll be able to keep up with those, all that content there. It comes right to your handheld device. You barely have to do any work. You could also give us a holler there with any lineup questions that you have. Even if you just want to talk, make fun of, Rocco's Survivor or whatever, hit us up, social media. Right here on YouTube as well, you could subscribe, you can comment, you could like our videos, and leave comments on the videos. We'll get back to you there as well. Footballgoons.com. You've got to check it out each and every week. Tuesdays, we've got the podcast that airs, so it'll be available first thing Wednesday morning. You're going to get your updated fantasy ranks at the middle of the week. And then Thursday, you're going to get your Goons, your Ghosts, and your daily fantasy value plays for each week. The Goons are the guys that we expect to overperform versus where they're pre-ranked. Ghosts are guys that we expect to underperform versus where they're ranked. And obviously daily values are guys who you're going to pay a little bit less for and get more production from. You can only get all that info, footballgoons.com. Keep it locked there all week long, and we'll catch you guys next time.